Oh, we have to wait to go
We have
on.
to wait. Yes, it's very good. Thank you.
Okay, welcome back to the Sunset Advisory Commission on September 21st, 2022. We're here to discuss our next commission or board, which is the Emergency Personnel Survivor Benefit Review Board. And we have Tim Duggan and Justin St. James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with regrets, Treasurer Pierce and Ashlyn Doyon they're both traveling today, and so they're unable to be here. So you're decidedly getting the B team, but and answer any of your questions. So the Emergency Personnel Survivors Benefit Review Board is not recommended for sunset. That is, it does not meet regularly. Thank God. It is there for the event that an emergency personnel passes away to provide a certain benefit. So it only meets in those circumstances. We're not recommending that for to be sunsetted. And if you have any questions, we'll do our best. We might have to take them back though, given that these are not areas that we have significant experience in. We have talked to folks in the office and we'll try to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions?
Well,
Rob, go ahead.
so it would be underneath number 4 is, what would happen if the Board of Commission no longer, fulfilled, if the board no longer existed, who would or who could pick up what this board does?
I think statutory.
Well, I was going to say statutorily find another either agency or I guess a new committee to do it. But if that was eliminated, that is sort of the actionable part of that statute. So it would default to no one could release those funds as if that piece were changed.
Makes sense. Okay. So statutorily, this is the only board that currently could do this.
Yeah, because it's in the enabling statute that creates the fund and it has the dispersal at the end of that section. So if you folks were to decide to change it, you could always determine it was a different entity.
And again, I'm sorry if I missed it. And say over the last 10 or 15 years, how many times has the board had to meet and actually take action? Third.
Sec.
Did I not see it on here?
We do know this. It looks like benefits were paid in fiscal year 9, 10, 11, and 16. So it looks like 4 times in the last 12 or 13 fiscal years and none in the last 6 fiscal years.
Perfect. Thank you.
Can I ask you, go ahead.
Pat and then Brian, please.
So I'm a little confused with this and I just want to make sure I understand. This board is just for emergency personnel who pass, correct? So are they contributing into a fund like the municipal fund, or they're not contributing at all? And this board disperses money to them or to their.
Yeah, this isn't like a retirement benefit or something like, right? Like our retirement systems have a death benefit.
Yeah.
For folks who are members of the system in the event they die in the line of service. This is separate.
Okay.
So it's not something that folks are paid into. I think the appropriations are made by the legislature and typically have been carried forward in past years.
Okay. All right. So in other words, it's a benefit that we provide to individuals, families who pass doing emergency services work.
That's the way to put it, yes.
Okay. All right.
So just to follow up on Matt's question, there's a fund that exists and it has funding in it and it just is sort of in a bank somewhere and.
Approximately $170,000.
Okay.
Currently.
I think we're going to roll over.
Yeah, I think we are.
Yeah.
We've asked for some carry forward.
The treasurer likes to keep about 200,000 in the fund.
Okay. Good.
Is this the only occupation that we do this with?
For this board, yes, but
I mean,
whether or not there's something else out there, I can't think.
There's a victims' compensation fund, I know. I don't know how that's out of.
I was thinking like, well, I don't mean to go looking for more people, but let's say you were, so you have the the rescue squads that, you know, people get lost or they ski off the trail or something like that, and volunteers go to rescue them, you know, in inclement weather and cold weather, and I never thought about it, but now that I read this, I think, well, what happens if they died? I mean, is there,
Aren't they covered here? Because if they're a nonprofit that provides emergency services to the state of Vermont, they would be eligible to,
okay.
if they die in the line.
Certainly, and I think some of it is fact specific, but the statute does appear to contemplate folks who are doing those types of services, EMT services.
Okay, all right.
But I think some of that the devil might be in the details about who exactly and what
Yeah.
capacity.
The only reason I asked that, Jared, I just wondered if there are other occupations that could or should fall into that benefit, that's all. I mean,
I would say that if there were occupations out there that felt that they provide a service to the state and they might die in the line of duty, that those occupations should come forth to the legislature and ask to have a fund set up for them, which is what happened with this fund. It was because we rely so much on volunteers and on partially paid and on emergency services. And this is people who really are providing emergency services, whether it's, that aren't covered by another death benefit.
Thank you. Brian, you had a question? Or?
No, I already asked them.
So I'm just looking at the minutes of the last meeting in 2016. The meeting lasted 15 minutes. So, well, I don't question the importance of doing this. I do wonder why we need a board or commission to perform this function. There didn't seem to be a lot of discussion of the benefits they provided. There seemed to be procedures that were developed in 2007 that they have to follow. So I'm just wondering why we need 4 people to meet to make this decision. Is there a reason for that?
I can't speak to the original rationale, but on some of these matters, I can't see, particularly if there's facts and circumstances that have to be evaluated. I mean, I'm reporting to multiple boards. I feel like having the different viewpoints of a number of people is sort of important to make sure there's a gut check from, folks with a different lens. So even if the meeting might not last long, sometimes I still feel the fact that you're having a number of people kind of opine and make sure, okay, this checks out. There's value there. Whether or not it's the right amount, I can't speak to that or the underlying purpose.
Okay.
are you suggesting that, or is your thought process that another organization, well, for example, I'll use this example. My brother was a state employee and died. He got sick and he died and passed, and they had an emergency disbursement for his insurance or something that he got it earlier, or something of that nature. So are you suggesting that maybe that organization cover the few folks that might?
I guess my only thought is, could the treasurer handle it?
I'm sure the treasurer could handle it, but I think that Tim is right, that there needs to be some different perspectives, and I would not want to see one person making this decision, because that we don't know what the circumstances are, because these are people who die in the line of duty. And I was actually wondering why somebody from public safety wasn't on there. It's fire safety is on there, and they are part of public safety, but they represent firefighters. They don't represent EMS or law enforcement, and I just was curious about that. But I don't want to, I'm not suggesting we add anybody to it, but there is nobody on here that represents EMS. But anyway, I think that would be my only thought.
I
is that
understand that.
You don't want to leave a decision like this to just one person with no, what's the word I'm looking for? Checks and balance. And they probably don't charge a lot. Their per diems are already covered with their salary.
Right, there's only one per diem.
Yeah, only one.
Okay. Next is the Treasurer's Local Investment Advisory Committee.
Sure. As we noted, this was created in 2014 and was tasked with increasing economic development in Vermont and to create jobs with the goal of committing up to 10% of the state's average available cash balance to local investments. Well, I guess that's where maybe we'll ask if there's any questions before we get further into it.
I don't.
Does anybody have any questions yet? Nope, keep going.
Okay. And we did provide a list of the current investments and credit facilities on the last page, which is from the annual report. Someone may ask, but there was only one meeting in 2021, I would note, but that we are not recommending this for Sunset. The office believes that this is an important function to try and create jobs and investments locally. And I think it would note that while this is not necessarily Tim and I's bailiwick, but there is a interest rate floor that pre-2021, there was some feedback, and it's reflected in the last minutes from the board last year about folks could secure funding potentially somewhere else for rates. But now in this different economy and different interest rate economy, I think there is potentially more opportunity for this fund to have a role given where things stand today. And I would note, there was, just want me to note this or not note this? It just would note there was discussion last session, and we did reference it here as well, that there was at least floated by the Treasurer's Office the concept of adding 3 members to broaden the stakeholders' input as well, and maybe different perspectives on the board. So that is still floating out there. It didn't move, and I think we pulled it back last session, but just want to sort of raise that.
We do prepare a bill that all this goes into. And if that is a real suggestion and there's agreement about that, then you might want to ask if we would put that into the bill.
I was thinking about that after you mentioned that earlier today. It might be a very good vehicle for it. I need to talk with Ashlyn about that to make sure I understand what, exactly how it ended up, but it does, kind of for similar reasons, when you're awarding funds, right, through a loan like this, it's good to have a number of people just to make sure that there are those viewpoints. Mm-hmm. So I imagine some of that's what's animating that move. And I'll ask her if she thinks that this is appropriate vehicle and we'll be in touch.
I remember when this was set up, actually, it was a partial response to the request to establish a state bank.
Yeah, I think it's been pretty successful, though a victim of the low interest rate environment. When there's readily available funds out there in the market, we have a floor that we can't go below in our amounts, then it makes this sort of a less compelling proposition. But I think we all know what the news out of the Fed's going to be today and where rates are headed. So it may be more attractive in the future.
So can I ask a couple of questions so I follow this a little bit? A local investment advisory committee. And it says here you take 10% of the average cash on hand and you essentially loan it out,
Yes.
right? I mean, that's what you're doing. And these are all the organizations that are on the back page that have received funding. Exactly is the Neighborhood Works of Western Vermont. What is that?
NeighborWorks, I think they do housing investments. It's a nonprofit that, qualifies for the program. And I think I believe, so each act of the legislation that appropriates a certain amount of funds of lending capacity here designates the use. And I think some of the uses that NeighborWorks works on is the sort of low interest mortgages. There's a lot of efficiency work that folks do with these funds. It's whatever's designated in that authorization by the legislature.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm fairly familiar with that group. Lots of weatherization type projects and that kind of thing. What mortgages do they buy? Buildings that have fallen into disrepair, try to fix them up.
Okay. So, but if you weren't giving the money to these organizations, you'd be investing it. Is that accurate or?
Well, not in the same way the pension, this is our operating cash. And so
Right.
it would probably be in a bank or something equivalent. This isn't money that we would have committed to like long-term investments generally.
Okay.
So these are typically 5 to 7 year maturities. So it's longer than what we would normally commit this type of operating cash to, but that's why it's capped at 10%.
Okay. You ever had any defaults?
Not to my knowledge. No.
Okay. And I just have one last question and I'm done. So interest rates go up, which they'll probably do, and they continue to go up. So you're loaning money, you're loaning 10% of the average cash on hand to nonprofit organizations at a discounted rate. Is that?
Probably at a rate that they might not be able to achieve in the marketplace.
Okay. Well, who loses in that deal? Somebody.
I think that's the beauty of the program. Maybe that doesn't get to make the loan I think the point was to bring some of this economic activity into Vermont and not have people go out of Vermont to get their loan from a big bank or something.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to follow this.
Out-of-state banks might be the only potential
So
loser.
where do you keep your cash? Do you keep it out of state?
Under the pillow.
Under the pillow? In the mattress? All right.
It's just worth noting because I think NeighborWorks is interesting because the legislature multiple times has amended this statute, and that was one of them in 2018, 2019 to allow like weatherization investments, for instance.
Yep.
That's it is an evolving law, which I think does, I would say, circle and support our do not sunset request because of its ongoing value.
But, so I just picked up on something that Matt said, and I didn't understand that, but he said nonprofits. This doesn't have to go to nonprofits, does it? I mean, this could go to
It went to the state in several instances.
Office buildings are on.
I think that's technically the bottom half. I think that's technically a slightly different program.
I can't read any of this on the back here, so it's tiny.
We can shoot you a link to the annual report. It's a page in page 41 of our annual report.
But could a private company, say Commonwealth Dairy or somebody who needs that gap financing, come to this fund for an investment? Does it have to be a nonprofit? I didn't think that was the case when we set it up. I thought it was for local investments, and some of it, I know agriculture was one of the things that was talked about. And
I'm going to have to respond. I'm going to have to come back to you. I'd have to review all of the acts that appropriate the lending authority. I don't have that offhand.
Okay.
I know it hasn't happened, and I don't know that we've gotten interest in it. So that's why in my mind, I'm thinking that there might be some limitation on who could apply, but I need to come back. I need to check it.
Okay.
I'd be
So looking through this list, other than the Southern Correctional Facility, there doesn't seem to be many loans being made in the southern half of the state.
And Rutland is not south.
Yeah, that's a bit concerning. Most of these are in Chittenden County.
So I think the actual investments are the result of an RFP process where we put out an RFP and ask for interest in this program. It's not directed in the way that this board is directing where in the state the investment needs to take place. I don't know what level of interest has come from the South over the years, to be honest.
Well, it could be in part due to the makeup of the members who may all be from northern Vermont.
Well, I don't see any Lamoille County investments here, so maybe we should get somebody from Lamoille County.
Well, I'm just.
To make sure some of it goes our way.
I'm just saying the majority seem to be headed towards Chittenden County. I mean, by far.
I would want to see what the geographic scope of sort of NeighborWorks, the projects they work on. I don't know that, and that's something I would need to look at more closely to answer that one way or the other.
Well, I guess that's a question that I'd like to have an answer to at some point, because I am concerned about the lack of diversification across the state.
Understood.
Amron, do you know if it's limited to nonprofits? Okay,
It's not.
it's not.
No.
I didn't think
Well,
so.
And I don't know, maybe they can explain this. There's a number, if you go to the page on the treasurer's website for this committee, they have a number of solicitations. And so they have an ongoing one, which is available to municipalities, school districts, social service providers, state agencies, and authorities, regional planning commissions, and similar organizations. So that's pretty broad. But I mean, I'm just like, I'm wondering why municipalities in southern Vermont are taking part in this, because I mean, and because I mean, I can think of a number of projects in my area that probably could have used some assistance from this program. Though I don't think it's widely known to municipalities.
In Lamoille County.
Yeah.
Or in Lamoille. I mean, I'm not.
No, I understand the point. I'll follow up with the treasurer on that.
All right, thank you.
I feel compelled to put my county's name. Thank you.
Any more questions or comments on this one?
Okay. Then we have,
Can I ask one last question? Do we make any money on this deal? I mean, is it,
2%, right? Like whatever the interest rate is.
okay, so I mean, so I know, but, so sometimes we have these things these programs that actually make money. I mean, the way they're structured, they weren't set up that way, but they actually bring funds in. And
This would be the delta between the interest rate you get at your bank, right? Where we
Right.
put the money and the 2 or whatever % interest rate that loan is out for. That delta would be money to the state's bottom line.
we make money.
I can't say that. I don't think it's going to be a very substantial amount, but I think, but yes.
Jack it up a little bit, we'll make some more money.
No, but the point is to gap financing.
I'm just trying to bring more revenue into the state.
I know, and my guess is that some of these things that were funded actually do end up bringing more revenue into the state because of the programs that, whatever it is that they spent the money on.
For example, supporting economic efficiency retrofits or something.
Yeah.
So one of the main
Yeah.
drivers, yes.
Okay, should we move on?
yep.
That one.
Capital Debt Affordability Advisory Committee.
All right, so I'm going to start on this one. So this, This committee, we do not recommend for sunset. This committee has been very effective in sort of setting up a process to use data-driven analysis to look at what a responsible level of debt that the state can issue every year is. They look at it and make a recommendation for a 2-year period. And I think in all of the ratings agencies reports that I've seen, the state gets high marks for its fiscal discipline and, cooperative budgeting practices. This is part and parcel of that because it sets out a process that is known, agreed on, and that there's buy-in to have folks make a recommendation. And the legislature has adhered to those caps, I think, consistently since its inception. I don't recall a time when there has been a variance from it. So it's a critical function that this board undertakes. And so for that reason, we don't recommend it for sunset. The one other point that I'd make more recently, you might remember this past year, and I'll stumble on the name, it's a capital expenditure cash fund that the legislature created. $20 million was put aside basically for pay-go. I think that idea was incubated in the CDAC, and the treasurer had been working on it for a number of years. Her colleagues at the CDAC kind of talked it through, helped shape it, and it ended up in being passed, and I think it was in the big bill. So, and that, that's effectively a pay-go mechanism for, projects that might not have the same kind of long-term time horizon that typical capital project would have. That kind of fiscal prudence, I think, would be seen also favorably by the ratings agencies. And I think it kind of shows some of the soft value that CDOT can add in addition to its, strict statutory.
Any questions on this one?
No.
So the recommendation is coming up fairly shortly. 30th?
Hard at work.
Yeah. And did you mention that they've never bonded for more than this advisory committee recommends?
That is my understanding. I can't think of a time they have. I'm not sure if, I know Senator White, you've been here
A long time.
but if you recall, but it has been my recollection that institutions pays very close attention to the recommendations of CDAC, and the legislature as a whole does as well.
It comes up in every budget or institution's conversation, and there are always people who want to bond beyond that, and they get beat down. I mean, because this committee knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
Okay. Private Activity Bond Advisory Committee? The treasurer's office is as bad as some school superintendents in having so many committees that you have to meet with.
Not this one.
Well, I was going to say, this one might be.
A little more straightforward.
Yeah.
And you do see, but that this committee was dissolved in 2015, although it did look that the statutory recommendation did not occur. So the statute was not updated as proposed in this memo. But I think everyone has been acting as if this was dissolved. It has not met in the last 7 years, but the statute did not catch up with that. So as on the to-do list, that might be there. And how things have been working is set forth at the end of the memo, where the treasurer, basically the problems that were identified by the committee and then recommended that it dissolve. The treasurer created a system whereby the goal of the committee could be done basically in-house by the treasurer. And so then the recommendation was that the treasurer will manage the state's annual private activity bond allocation process, coordinate with important stakeholders, but there wasn't the need for this committee. And that's why it hasn't been used in 7 years now.
So this is the recommended language changes?
It was in 2015, and I think we need to discuss and check with the treasurer to see if there are any changes in the last 7 years. But I think what I would say is it would make sense to have the reality match the statute if, in the sense it doesn't exist. So yeah, but I think we would check with the treasurer on our side to see if this is, obviously Ledge Council, I'm sure will want to put their nice touches on it. I'm not sure who did, but yes, we think that the statute should reflect the lack of it.
So if you can get that language to us, we'll get it into the bill.
We're just confirming that this is the right language.
Yeah, one or the other.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Our two language homeworks then are the LIAC and this. Yep. To make sure that we have that to you.
What did this group actually do? I'm trying to read it and understand it. On number 3, what did they do? Is that too tough a question? Yeah. Okay, what's
It's a very lengthy memo talking about what didn't work about it, so I'm not sure that a lot did. I think it was conceptual, and it looks like they only met several times and decided it was not going to be
I
feasible.
think it was generally allocating the private activity bond allocation every year. These organizations, non-governmental organizations like VITA, VHFA,
Right.
there's an allocation of tax exempt bond capacity that they can utilize.
Yeah.
And I think that's what this committee was looking at, how that gets,
leverage that or
what piece, I think, might be.
Okay. All right, thank you. I just, for my own interest. Okay.
Okay. I think you guys are off the hook. Are you not?
Oh, well, we had okay,
That was on.
okay, that was just on our initial invite. Okay, there's the Financial Literacy Commission as well, but
Oh, yeah.
it's not on for today, but okay.
Oh, well,
It also is dissolved, so that is
okay.
Oh, what?
Oh, no, we like those.
the questionnaire.
Yeah, just, we like,
We have time for that. We'll always have time for one week.
why was that? I'm just curious because I've been telling everybody that I work with low-income housing, and I'm telling all our people that the treasurer has a great financial literacy program.
And in this case, the enacting legislation it looked like had an automatic sunset in 2018, which was, so it was repealed in July 1, 2018, but I don't know the specifics. They submitted several reports, the commission did as part of its work, and our office is still, it's not like financial literacy ended for the office, but for this commission, they submitted their work and then legislature repealed it.
Okay.
But just want to make note of that because we did submit a questionnaire.
Let's take credit for it.
All right. Well, anything else for? Thank you.
Should we coordinate with Ms. Hussey with language?
Yeah, that would be good. And with Ameren too. Sorry, Tim. With Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
All right, thank
Nice
you.
afternoon.
Thank you.
It's 2 of them.
Okay.
2 so efficient. We're half an hour ahead of
We
you.
are so
Still
far
have one.
ahead of ourselves.
Retired employees. Committee
Yeah, we do
contracts.
have one
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
on Zoom.
Yep, Clark, sorry.
He's here? Oh. there
Yes,
he is.
hello.
Hello?
How are you doing today?
Good. We'll just quickly introduce ourselves and then jump right into it.
Okay.
So no, Senator Collmore, do you want to start and we'll go this way?
Delighted. Rutland County State Senator Brian Collmore, how you doing?
Good, thank you.
I'm Tracy DeLude. I'm one of the gubernatorial appointees and I oversee the boards and commissions for the governor. Nice to see you.
I'm Jeanette White. I'm a senator from Wyndham County.
John Gannon, representing Halifax, Whitingham, and Wilmington.
Rob Leclerc, representative from Barrytown.
I'm Matt Kraus. I'm one of the other gubernatorial appointees, and I live in Stowe.
So the goal of this committee is to look at we have about 300 and some boards and commissions in the state. And 3 years ago, we were charged with reviewing them to see which ones were necessary, which ones weren't necessary anymore, and those that were necessary, if there were statutory changes that should be made to reflect the current world, because some of them were constituted many, many years ago. So that's what we're doing. And we've got the questionnaire here, and if you would like to just tell us a little bit, and then we'll ask questions.
Sure. So I'll start by saying that, introducing myself, I am Clark Collins. I'm the Deputy Director of Benefits and Wellness for the Department of Human Resources for the state of Vermont. And I think I should say at the onset regarding the RECCE committee is that it is comprised about half and half of administrative appointees, of which I am one. I'm the Commissioner of Human Resources appointee to the committee. But the other half is also appointed by the VSEA. So when I'm speaking today and my thoughts also on that questionnaire, I represent the administration. The VSEA, if they were to, they might want to share their own thoughts on the committee itself. But so I'm speaking on behalf of the administration. The committee's purpose essentially is, as you may know, retirees do not bargain for the benefits. It is the VSEA bargains for active employee benefits, and per statute that is then carried over into retiree benefits. But retirees do not have a seat at the table, so to say, during the bargaining sessions. So the point of this committee is to allow a chance for retired employees to discuss the plan and the benefits so that if they have a recommendation, they can send a recommendation to the Secretary of Administration to sort of give a voice to retirees. That was the initial intent of the creation of RECCE. As you'll notice on the questionnaire, it has not met in several years. It was originally supposed to be meeting at least twice a year, but since 2020, it has not met. So it's been a minute, and I think one of the reasons for that is there are other avenues for retirees to meet with administration. For me personally, my door is always open. We're always willing to have meetings. That is also true for the Commissioner of HR. And generally speaking, if the retirees are looking for a voice, they come to us directly, and we're more than willing to meet with them to give them that voice. So I think from an administration point of view, we haven't really had a need for this committee. But I do think that it is probably the only formal way in which retirees have a forum to share their thoughts, or have a forum in which to contact the Secretary of Administration. As I said, we're open to meeting, but that also is, we have a good working relationship. If that relationship were to falter in any way or something along those lines, or they wish to speak not to us, but directly to the Secretary of Administration, this would really be the vehicle and the committee for them to do so.
Are the people appointed by the VSEA, are they retired people?
They are, yes.
Okay, I'm looking at the list here, and I know Dave Bellini is retired. I don't know the other two.
Yes, so all the appointees to that committee are retired state employees.
Okay.
With the exception of myself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
hasn't met for 2 years. Was it active before then? In other words, if you have a commission like this and it sees a need, or it perceives that there should be some benefit and there's no bargaining opportunity available, then you would think they would be submitting something, saying, the insurance, death insurance could go up $1,000 or, have a COLA attached to it or something like that, but it hasn't made any recommendations in 2 years. So there's no perceived need to be able to recommend it, or they just don't really care, or there are describe other options available. So help me to understand why this commission is not making recommendations. It's not active.
Sure. So I would say it's a combination of pretty much everything you just said, meaning that it tends to be more active if there is an active change in the plan. So for example, I've been working in my position for 8 years. About 4 years ago, there was a relatively significant change to the plan. And they met regularly at that point. In fact, they actually met almost monthly at that point. And it became a vehicle for retirees to weigh in on the change in the plan. Typically speaking, significant changes to the plan it doesn't happen often. So I think they feel the need when something significant is changing to the plan, but on a more regular basis, I don't feel like they have a drive to meet.
That's a little bizarre. Okay.
So we just were observing something here and wondered why the people are appointed by the VSEA as opposed to the VREA, because there is
SEA.
VRSEA.
That's just statutory language. The statutory language says that the VSEA appoints 4 or 3 members. The administration appoints 3 members. And then the Commissioner of Human Resources is as a member as well. And I've been the appointee.
That's very interesting.
It's very interesting because,
Yeah.
the Vermont,
Retired.
the
The
VSERS board-
VSREA.
The VSERS board is made up of VRSEA members as well as VSEA members. So
Yes.
it's a little puzzling that, what do we call it, RECI or RECI? Is all appointed by VSEA.
Yeah.
What I will say is that generally speaking, the administrative appointees tend to be from the VRSEA. So it's sort of how it's balanced in that way, is that the administration, when we're looking at retired employees, because the VSA is already represented across the table, we tend to pick VRSEA retirees.
Okay, so I have another question, which our legislative counsel pointed out to us last night, which is that I guess per statute, the committee is also supposed to make recommendations to the state treasurer about dental benefits?
Yes, which is, it's that discussion is, I don't want to say is amongst them, but typically speaking, DHR does not administer their dental benefits. So that is something that is, if they want to discuss it and they want to make a recommendation, I'm generally not part of that discussion.
Have there been discussions about dental benefits?
In the meetings that I've had, no.
Go ahead.
Can I ask a more basic question? Why is it that state retirees can't bargain for additional benefits? In other words, you have a pool of people out
They're
there,
not employees.
thousands of people who are retired. Why is there no bargaining option or vehicle for them to say, hey, we think we should get A, B, or C, and let's bargain for it?
Because the collective bargaining agreement, which is what is dictated for the active state plan, for the plan benefits, that is entirely between the administration and the VSEA, the VTA, and the union representation among active employees. The state retirees do not have a union to bargain with. So that's why they're not bargaining, is because they don't actually have a bargaining team. You could make the argument that perhaps the VSEA or the VTA could have a representative on their bargaining team to have a voice, but that's not for us to dictate.
Yeah, they're not a bargaining unit.
Well, I mean, yeah, you get more you can ask for bargaining authority from another entity. And I saw it, where did I see it the other day? It was in the newspaper. Somebody was asking to join VSEA and they were,
Oh, the deputy sheriffs.
that's it.
But that, they are active members, and we passed a statute last year saying that they could have a bargaining unit. If the retired employees wanted to have a bargaining unit, they would have to go, my understanding is they would have to go to the State Labor Relations Board to ask to become a bargaining unit, right? Because we have VSEA, VTA, and those are the two bargaining units in the state. Yeah, those are the two for state employees are the two bargaining units.
Okay.
So I don't want to take this too far, but there's nothing that prevents a group of retired state employees from saying, we want to set up a bargaining unit and then we want to bargain with the state over.
You'd have to then go to the Labor Relations Board.
I don't even know if they could, because they're not statutory employees. Right.
Yeah, they're not employees anymore. I don't think you could, but that you could try and go to the Labor Relations Board.
Well, think if we took your argument to its logical end. We could create a collective bargaining unit right here among the six of us.
Okay. All right.
I mean, what I will say is that we do have a benefits advisory committee called the BAC. That is a VSEA driven committee, but they do have representation from retirees on that BAC. The retirees do participate in those meetings. So, and when they voice their opinions on benefits, or they're showing issues that retirees are facing, the active VSEA members of that committee do tend to take that, they take that into consideration when they look at the bargaining issues. So I think they do have a vehicle to voice that. The difference is that's more, it's a roundabout way of doing it, as opposed to what the RECI does. Is the RECI does allow them to directly get in touch with the Secretary of Administration to share thoughts.
Well, I like the idea that your doors are always open and people can individually come in, but I also think that there needs to be this formal way for those people who might be more reluctant to individually come in and talk to you and say, these are ideas that we have. So I like the idea of having a more formal vehicle for the retired employees. But
So you're suggesting that this is the vehicle you want to maintain this?
Did we get a definitive answer on the dental?
Well, I was chatting with Ameren while you guys were talking, and I think we need to hear from the treasurer's office just to confirm whether they are using RECI with respect to dental benefits. But I think we could probably do that via email.
Are there dental benefits for retirees?
Yes.
Yeah.
There are. But that's the plan isn't administered by DHR, so that plan is administered by the retirement division.
Yeah, so we should just confirm that that's being used.
Yeah. Okay. Any more questions or comments?
Is the Department of Human Resources back working? You're not working remotely, are you?
Yes. So a majority of the human resources work some sort of hybrid schedule. There is someone in the offices on it, like each separate divisions. So for me, it's benefits and wellness. On any given day, there's at least one person in the office to be there to answer questions, or if someone drops in. And the same is true of the other divisions in DHR. But for the most part, DHR employees are the ones that are working out of 120 State Street, right across the street from you. They are mostly working hybrid schedules.
Okay, thank you.
Any more? Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Claire.
Okay. Do we want to act on this one now?
Well, we have all.
I think we need to check with
We
the
need to check
treasurer's
with,
office.
to make sure they're using this as,
And the other thing is, do we just want to check with the VSEA? I mean,
why they're appointing.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
just bizarre.
it is.
compared-
It's in the statute. That's.
I know.
Okay.
But we could
Yeah.
change the statute.
Right, that is, well, we should check with VSEA, but we should also check with VRSEA.
Yeah.
That's who.
But I mean, what Clark told us is, I guess, the governor appoints VRSCA,
No,
Nope.
it's actually the Secretary of Administration.
Secretary of Administration
Yeah,
does that.
appoints.
Secretary of Administration?
Yeah, appointed.
Those are not gubernatorial appointees.
Really?
They're from the administration, but it's the Secretary of
Okay,
Administration.
interesting.
I see they get no per diem either. Not that we do.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to ask actually that question, why VSEA appoints them. And even if the administration secretary appoints retired anyway. you
But
get
it's
what-
not outlined that they have to, so it's.
Right.
It's just not, yeah.
Right.
It's not there.
Okay, all right, so we'll hold off on that one until we get those answers.
Yep.
We could do the other ones that preceded it.
Yeah.
Should have wanted to.
Yeah,
We could go to our next agenda item because I do see
Okay.
that Tanya is here and no need for her to sit around and hear us debate the record.
no, it's bad enough that she watches us on a tube.
Hey,
There's nobody out there watching now.
Questions. Well, good afternoon. For the record, I'm Tanya Marshall. I'm the Director of the Vermont State Archives and Records Administration and also State Archivist and Chief Records Officer for the state of Vermont. And
And you know all of us, right? You know Tracy?
yes,
Okay,
We've
okay.
been chatting.
I assume so.
I do know everyone. And I have some, I didn't send something to Andrea, but I can certainly put it out there. But I'm here to do an update, but I also can answer any questions, however you'd like to proceed. I'm happy to take that direction.
I think it's updated.
Yes.
Yeah,
Especially because we got it wrong last time we talked about it.
we did.
And I'm having a little difficulty hearing, so you might give you some background to where we are and how we're working. So just to answer the question that came up in August, because I was watching, you did pass a statute. It's Title III VSA 116A that creates the registry. And then you also put a scope in there about what defines state board and commission. It's a little bit different than the scope that you're doing for the Sunset Advisory Commission. So the scope there is executive branch and it's statewide jurisdiction. So it's just something to note as the commission kind of does its work. We did come back in fall and I testified that definition that's currently there is probably going to raise some questions and we're starting to experience more of those questions. So I welcome the opportunity to provide those to the commission as we continue to collect that information. But just for updates, we have what I call, there's two parts for the registry. The first part is the information architecture. So this is how we actually take all these laws, look at them, and extract information that we know is common across all of them. The name of the board or commission, the appointing authorities, the membership, how many. And so we have architected that. And that's just part of our normal work that we do at the Vermont State Archives and Records Administration because it is part of a larger system that we have. And now we're working on the data architecture that's being developed and tested. And this is how that data collection, mainly on the membership, is going to happen. So between individuals, like for the governor's office, how do we get this data? So it's not going to be in the form of records, it's data that we're going to be getting on the membership because that changes more often than it will be the General Assembly sunsetting a commission or state board. So that's on track. We're using existing technologies for that. As you know, we have a different incoming administration. So we anticipate that some of those technologies might be changing. But right now we're on target to make sure that at the end of December, we'll be able to launch the registry, and that information will be within the current web-based technologies that we have. And we're leveraging the Microsoft platforms. So that's on target. Now that we have the information governance, though, it's really exposing some additional questions for the commission. I think the logistics, Tracy's going to be an excellent resource for us. The governor's office, we're able to start getting good numbers about how many appointees. Obviously, the governor's office has the most at almost 990 based on the current data set that is still being adjusted. The next is the Speaker of the House at 63.
900 and then 63?
990 is about for the governor's office.
Oh.
And then
I can give you some preliminary statistics like that.
I'm just,
So we have a raw data set that we've done just on compiling the statutes related to state boards and commissions that are within scope of the definition in Title III, 116, which is executive branch state that have statewide jurisdiction. So it wouldn't be a board or commission of the legislative branch or a board or commission of the judicial branch. Right now, based on that raw data set, we're actually now cross-checking it against Ameren's second list. And so it's a moving target, but right now we're at 249 state boards and commissions, 269 appointing authorities. And note, some of those are dissolved entities, or we're cross-checking if it's a body that is, if an appointing authority is, say, a nonprofit, or there's a couple for-profits, we're checking that against the corporations. Secretary of State's office also registers corporations to see if they've been terminated, dissolved, defunct. The Artificial Intelligence Commission has a defunct or terminated appointing authority on it. So those are kinds of information that, for the commission's purpose and maybe Ledge Council and the General Assembly, this is where we'd like to have additional collaboration, because maybe if we'd done this earlier or understood that, we could have informed the commission more on that. But we'd like to have that ability to inform House and Senate of Ops as that moves forward as well. But there's 269 appointing authorities. Right now, we're running at 2,279 members, of which 461 are ex officios. And we define ex officios right now as members who are there because of their position, so it's not an appointee status. The Department of Public Safety, primarily the commissioner, is a designated member on more than 35 boards and commissions, followed by the Department of Health, also primarily the commissioner at about 30. And then the Secretary of the Agency of Agriculture and Food Markets. The state official, as I mentioned, with the most appointees is the governor with almost 999. Again, these numbers might change, but they're not going to be too different. And then it's the Speaker of the House with about 60 appointees, and the Senate Committee on Committees with 55.
oh, how come the House gets more?
Some of them are joint. And that's actually what
I just had to do it. Come on, it was for his sake.
registry, but I'm hoping you see the value of moving to a registry option, and originally was just a list, is we can run a lot of analytics to inform the General Assembly on that. And it's not just for this, this is, but we do this a lot for the statutes in general. The joint ones are a little interesting because there are a couple of joints that we have to make a determination, because maybe have 2 or 3 examples where it's a joint appointee, and the database is really kind of designed to assume that there's one appointing authority for each member. We do have in the registry too the qualifications for each of those, and I didn't tabulate that, but for different appointees, as the governor's office knows with the most, there's qualifications that are attached to many of the memberships, like a member of this organization who has this skill set or this background. So we're continuing to work on that. So we're going to be launching what we call version 1 in January. So hopefully it will be up and running by December. I also already mentioned that the inventory that you're currently working on includes legislative and judicial bodies that's out of scope. So we're working through that. There are some that are unclear, so we'll be having additional questions, and if there's an opportunity to work with Ledge Council, we'd like to maybe have that dialogue. The things that we're seeing, and the registries also, and there's a couple on your list. It's very difficult for boards and commissions that were created only in session law. So I have as a statement to let everyone know in September that we can attest that we will have, if it is codified in statute and it still exists as January, it is on the registry. If this commission has identified that has been established by executive order or session law, it will be on the registry. For those that this commission has not identified yet, it may or may not be on the registry. It's really hard to make that determination.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And we're kind of using different vehicles to try to find that. The other thing, and I don't know if it's come up in the dialogue of the commission, is that there's a number of examples in statute where an agency, department, or office can create its own advisory committees, and there's no scope statement on that. So Agency of Human Services, for example, in Title III, I think I have the citation here. I think I did. 268, that the secretary can create a committee, it's advisory only, but there's a number of examples on that, and it doesn't have specific membership. So we are not including those at this time, but we do. I think you can understand the challenges that you look at that. We're happy though to scour and find those and provide some information back to the commission. I'm not sure what you would like us to do with those. I mean, we don't know if they exist or not. They're only within the agencies of the office.
So, I mean, one thing that we can recommend in a bill, Tanya, is a change to a statute. And I mean, if that's causing your job to create this database, it's making it more difficult to do your job. Is there a suggested language change we could make with respect to these?
Right. I mean, I would scope it not.
Unnamed advisory committees that can be set up.
Right. I would put it in the context too, just legislation in general. If it's something as the committees go forward and think about how do you structure a board or commission, and I know last month you had a conversation about what is really the definition of a commission, what is really the definition of a board. I think it's just the registry that's highlighting those inconsistencies. So it's not just about that registry. It's really about how the state wants to move forward in defining those boards and commissions. The other questions that we're already starting to get in the conversations with agencies and departments, particularly those that have advisory bodies with different panel, council, and so forth, is there is a lot of uncertainty about applicability of being a public body or not. And public body now intersects with the open meeting law, and that's why the questions are happening. And there's some areas within the statutes, because some of these advisory committees are so embedded, but the way the definition of state board and commissions in Title III, 116A, which is the registry, is encompassing of working groups, encompassing of a lot of different groups that don't typically, or at least from the agency or department's interpretation, are a public body for open meeting law. And then there's others that are policymakers that we, public utilities that we all have in that, but there's a lot of different flavors within this. And that is intersecting now with some questions about whether or not that entity is a public body that's subject to the open meeting law.
Do you have an example? I'm just trying to figure out what would not be a public body. I mean, that's a little.
The working groups, there's individual task force that are set up. I could pull one up and provide it, but it would be an example where, and I think there's just more clarity, and I can come back and provide that with specific examples. The questions that were coming up were some of the agencies and departments saying they do treat it as a public body, but because it's a working group, And it was advisory just for small, or some of the, there's one or two examples in the Agency of Human Services, I believe in the Department of Health, but I don't have it in front of me right now, where employees are tasked to kind of create a task force. And so they're technically might come up on this list based on the definition of state board and commission. But, you know, in the executive branch, it could be, you know, just the same as having a task force that's not legislatively kind of called out. So some of the questions are maybe was called out to leverage that particular existing task force in the statute, but it wasn't intended. I think if there's opportunities in the recommended legislation coming out of this commission, and I can provide examples just for that clarity part, that I think would be helpful. I didn't anticipate it originally, but now that we've seen the raw data and some of the questions that have come from that, there does seem to be uncertainty. Majority are deferring to but there wasn't really clarity if they were subject to it. So this is going to bring more visibility. We're anticipating the questions because as the registry administrators, this is where people will go. So I'd rather see that if we can get clarity or be having that dialogue again with Legis Council and with the committees and during the session, I feel like 2003 and 4 will, 2023 and 2024, it's odd to say such late dates already, that we're going to be watching for the types of questions that we have. And we just want to have the opportunity to bring them back to the General Assembly as they happen. I think that, yeah, I mean, there's a lot, we had more questions last time that I think if there's an opportunity to come back, we'll have specific examples, but I'm not sure if there really can be resolved. We are seeing, there were a couple of different, and we're cross-tracking this with the 2022, but there were some missing boards and commissions on the 2021, but they might be on the 2022, so I don't have those answers yet for you. The Green Mountain Care Board kind of stood out because it wasn't on the 2021 inventory. The one that we were looking at, which just seemed odd. It had the nomination board and had others, but it's one of the spreadsheets that were provided didn't have it. So we're making some, and then we're keeping a list of those that we're not including from the Sunset Advisory Commission because they are judicial or legislative. And there's some that, like Vermont Center for Geographic Information, which may not be on the current inventory, but was for the 2021. You know, that's a division within Agency of Digital Services. So we're flagging those in case there are questions for it. There's also a couple of inactive ones, but I think they're being caught for the 2022 update that the commission has.
So Tanya, you said there's some defunct appointing authorities?
Yeah, if you pull it up, I don't have it in front of me right now. But let me just see. Is it okay if I?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if,
It might just take a minute for me to log in.
well, I'm just, that's something we could clean up too, because I mean,
I'll be able to tell you what we see.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody has an appointing authority and they don't exist anymore,
that's a problem.
it's a problem, and it's hard to have that person on the
Yeah.
board or committee. There's no one to appoint them.
I mean, she referenced the artificial intelligence.
If there's some,
And that's a fairly new. Yeah, it is.
and there's somebody on there that's already defunct.
And again, it's cross-checking with the corporate, so it's possibly they failed to file and, or didn't update their status. If that's information that's helpful to the General Assembly in drafting legislation, then that can be a vehicle the Secretary of State's office can provide or have a feedback loop to General or Legislative Council. But that's just the added areas that we've started doing just for data integrity purposes in preparation for this. So the appointing authorities that we have that are marked as currently dissolved and it goes between the state agencies is that one of the appointing authorities, do you want me to tell you what boards they're on as well?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's currently on your list for the State Natural Resources Conservation Council. That hasn't existed for quite some time, but it also has the Forest and Parks, the Board of Forest and Parks that was dissolved quite some time ago. So that's one of the appointees on that. Also on the same, the next
Share
one is.
these, by the way, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah.
Can you share them with Tracy so that you don't have to write them all down? I guess.
Yeah, I'll be able to provide that information. We've been talking about sharing our data set as we develop it.
Okay.
Thank you.
There's also the Vermont Prescription Drug Advisory Board has a representative status appointee from the Hospice and Palliative Care Council of Vermont. That has been a dissolved nonprofit.
Isn't that part of when, what's her name was in your Cindy Bruzzese, didn't that become part of what the Vermont Ethics Network, if that's what it's called? What is her?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And wasn't that one something that had been under there and now is overtaken by her?
I don't remember.
We should check.
I think so. I
That
think
makes sense, yeah.
Because, yeah. I think that was.
So the Artificial Intelligence Advisory Council has a appointee status from the Vermont Academy of Science and Engineering. Their status as a nonprofit has been terminated.
Ooh.
Again, it could be lack of filing, but it does have terminated nonprofit status. There's also the Census-Based Funding Advisory Group has an appointee status from Vermont Coalition of Disability Rights. They have been terminated. The Access Board has the House Committee on Institutions, doesn't exist, as the chair serving on the Access Board. The Emergency Service Provider Wellness Commission has the Vermont State Ambulance Association that has been terminated.
My guess is that they just haven't filed because Jim Finger is the head of that. And I cannot, for the life of me, imagine that they've been.
For me, it's just validating and it's additional information. I think it's just more of a knowledge, right? Having knowledge of this component.
Even if it's an error that they failed to file their biannual report, there's still an issue there. If they don't exist, how can they appoint?
Right, and they need, and not only that, they need to file their reports.
Right.
All right, so we started on this track using the corporation system from the Secretary of State's office to start developing contact information and then started noticing some trends for nonprofits and for-profits. So there's not too many. There's it looks like about 15. Some of them have multiple appointees, but that's information that I can provide separately as a list and I can send that to Andrea. And you can look at that because I would recommend maybe some changes or some determinations, at least on the terminated or dissolved nonprofit organizations. There's also from the membership standpoint, there's some odd ones that just will say it doesn't actually have an appointee specified. It will just say a representative from a large gas company or things of that nature, but it's not clear. Obviously, I'm assuming that maybe the commission is trying to reach out and doing those and those that we can highlight those where there really isn't a clear appointee or they're worded in a way that there isn't an identifier. So when I testified last fall, I talked about examples where it would name an association as appointing authority, but not necessarily say executive director or who. So we are defaulting to a president or executive director when those are not there. So we're making some adjustments in prep for the registry. And then as we had gotten further into the registry development and that information architecture to build out these specific workflows, that's when we're starting to identify it's not even a defined appointing authority.
Wow, that's a mistake. I mean,
I'm happy to put anyone to share this data. So it's fascinating to me because, I mean, we do this already for a lot of statutes that spend all our days in, I do personally in legislative statute. looking for the commonalities or trying to answer questions. And we put them together in this information architecture, and it really helps us inform government. It's knowledge, and that's really what information is there to do. But anything that we can do to collaborate with the commission, I know we only have a couple more months and some of you are retiring. Seeing you as part of the GovOps committees, but anything that we can do or collaborate with the General Assembly, we're happy to do that. And we're going to be continuing for the governor's office and let Tracy know. Our goal is actually make that she's not doing extra work as part of this registry too. So that's the data architecture piece that we're looking at. And as we know, is how many appointing authorities are part of state government. That gives us some more vehicles for the technology, and then thinking about what's the workload for individuals who submit something to us separately outside that. So we can leverage certain technologies within the state for the volume of appointee status that they have.
It's incredible that we have, I think, what'd you say, 269 appointing authorities?
Pardon?
269 appointing authorities?
Well, some of them are a gas company. Do you want to, some of them?
No, I believe you. I just, that's
The
incredible amount of appointing authorities.
state of Minnesota, which I've been testifying to this commission for quite some time, is one of the only other secretaries of state that have a comparable state boards and commissions registry process, and they've had it since the 40s. And we have almost the same number of boards and commissions and appointees as the state of Minnesota.
Well, that actually makes some sense. It says just because we're smaller in size and smaller in number doesn't mean there aren't the same functions. I mean, it's not. Government still needs the same number of, resources to operate no matter the population. It is just comparable. Yeah.
We just don't know if it's comparable to other states because other states don't necessarily have this information. The other thing that we've been looking at is how it's related over time. So very high in public safety related and health and agriculture. And then other areas of government that came into later have less boards and commissions. So I think when you look at that historically, and you can see how structured government started with boards and commissions, and then a department staff got added. That commissioner would then be appointed by the commission and be part of that. It's not surprising that some of the other areas where they have overlapped with local government in a way that need continuity have had that role, but that might be part of the reexamination. And that came up, I think, in testimony last year, maybe by you, Senator White, about, if there is a state agency already doing this work or could be leveraged, do you need a state board or commission or advisory panel, or what is the purpose? And you're doing that data collection now, but you can definitely see the trending where it had been higher, or if there's a new area, a lot of activity around the creation of a board or commission, but maybe still staying in that status. Bless you.
So can you tell from your data set whether the legislature has been creating more boards and commissions as time goes on, or?
Well, last time you did add more than last, but it's hard because it's a moving target right now. And some of the things that we had on our list were non-executive specific. So we have been going up and down.
I see.
We would be able, as we're running the data curation, once we get that second edition on to show like when was this aboard, we have this information. Before we get into the data components to collect it, make sure it's there, we'll be able to tell you whether or not you created more. But the seats, the actual membership, it's more of a snapshot. Start with this registry.
Did we ever make any decisions about the definitions? I mean, I know, like, you're calling this a commission. I don't think of this as a commission at all. I think of this as a committee. And I know last year when there were two bills that came to us from the House and they had commissions. in them, and we made them change to advisory committees or advisory councils, because, and I don't know if we've come to a decision about that, but it seems to me that it would be a lot clearer to people if we had some definitions, like a commission is a freestanding thing, like the Human Rights Commission or the Public Utilities, what is that called? Public Utilities Commission. They're kind of freestanding. Boards are boards that actually make decisions, like the Parole Board and the Labor Relations Board. Committees are committees that are advisory, and task forces and working groups are temporary. It would make so much more sense if we could do something like that. And then, because as it is now, when a committee, a standing committee comes up with something, they just name it, whatever they want to.
We, this commission, whether it's or not.
I know, that's what we are called.
I provided testimony on that because it was one of the first things that came up as.
I remember that.
And I do have, it's a written testimony, I believe it's from either, it's pre-COVID, because I remember being in the other in 2018. Now that we have more data, like we actually know, originally it was just seeing the inconsistencies, but not having the actual information from the statutes to be able to illustrate those inconsistencies. I would, be happy, not so much to make a recommend, but to show that, I do think there needs to be clarity on independence in some of the ways in the statute that we're struggling with right now, but I'm hoping that we'll be able to get it cleared up for the registry. Well, I know we'll get it cleared up for the registry, but get it cleared up within the next week or so, is the attachment and what that means and looks like, because some of the wording is a little bit different than just being attached to a state board or a state agency or department for like administrative support versus independence. So it looks at what those other language is in the statute about advisory versus policy. But I would be able to at least maybe we could build into there looking at which is a policy-making body clearly by statute, which is an advisory clearly by statute, and provide that information back, and then really have this commission before it ends its work, look at the naming. Because originally our staff was trying to do it based on the naming with the assumption that there was consistency, and then started finding there was not consistency. A panel is very differently across all that. So it really, the name doesn't matter right now as much. And that's why we started building those into the registry as we started hearing questions. Same with the public, body. Are we a public body if we're a small working group that was of, individual state employees on one particular agency? What was the intent, just to say, go work on this and come back? Or was the intent that they were policy level making decisions, or, and what does the public need to be available to witness that dialogue? Would you like me to add that in and provide that information?
It would be great.
Yeah.
We're anticipating questions, so that's really for us to also need that information.
Yeah, we're just all over the place with naming.
Nice little, boards and commission dashboard. I do think the commissioner of health is, I don't know how someone can serve on 36 or 29.
Or 35 for DPS?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Well, it probably says for designee.
I'm sure it does, but
That was also one of the things that's inconsistent within the statutes, and we've been tracking that, which actually state designee and which don't. So maybe there's also one distinct area, the legislature can consider kind of putting in within that designees are always an option, or if it's the other, but it's inconsistent, and so we obviously know that designees must be there.
Yeah.
It's been a great. I enjoy this stuff, but
Did you happen to count up the racial equity director appointments?
Pardon?
Did you happen to count up the racial equity director appointments? I know in the last couple of years, as I'm starting to dig.
That's the highest number of the which one?
Racial equity director?
Yeah, it's on a number. I can tell you what.
And she's only existed for 3 years.
Yeah.
Girl.
Yeah.
So they can't put her on any more committees.
No, because every racial
Yeah.
equity bill we pass
Has to have-
contains a committee and she's on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's hard.
Not as high as some of, I mean, it's just, it's watching different patterns over time because based on the legislation, we can see right now what we have is 6.
But she's only existed for a few years. It'll.
And I think
it'll
there's 2 that just
go
came
up.
out of this
Yeah.
legislative session.
Yeah.
Racial Intelligence Advisory, Health Equity Advisory, Racial Disparities Advisory Panel or Advisory Board. Oh, sorry, that's not, some of them are appointee status. So for, as an ex officio status, it is currently 4.
Not as bad as I thought, but we have time.
Really, yeah, load her up.
So our goal is that what we have here, which is, internal as we build it, that same ability will be available to the public as well to
Yeah.
drill down and see who has appointing status and what the qualifications, members, and have the individual appointees. And I think this is going to be the tricky part that we'll be working through is with who have different qualifications. There might be 20 appointees from the governor's office, but each one has different qualifications that have to be
Like
met.
we just heard from the Labor Relations Board, where 2 are management, 2 are neutral, 2
Yeah,
labor.
yeah.
There's also older language, the human services, and I think this came up with terms during the August meeting and questions of that. There's areas in statute that where human services can create any advisory committee, the secretary can, and then it has an appointee status, but in this case, it says appointees cannot serve longer than the term of the secretary. And we haven't started to look to see if there's areas in different parts of the statute above some of these boards or commissions that might already have term components that aren't in the actual statute. It just raised a second layer of looking to see, okay, does this actually, if there aren't underneath the Agency of Human Services, for example, term status with this other statute that says, appointee of the Human Services Secretary, would this same law apply? We do have, I guess the additional is which memberships do not have terms.
Oh, well.
And then we fall back on that 255 that I've been using that I mentioned last time,
Yeah.
or 56 and 57.
And we'll probably have really tight clarity on that by end of October, because that's our second round as we build out the data architecture for the actual appointing. As we're getting closer and closer to the real information that's going to be changing on a regular basis. And as we do that, we're building in the term from there.
So I was just thinking of the 990 that the governor has to appoint and thinking that Tracy has to go through 990 letters of recommendation and applications, and
Well, thank God they're not all due at the same time.
that is true.
That is what, but going back through that, when there is no term noted, I'm reverting everything back to being February 28th of the end of the biennium. And so February 28th is going to be a horrific time. Absolutely horrific. But
Yeah,
it's the only, keeping with the statute, it's the best way to say this is what the statute says.
yeah. And then it's interesting to see which of those 990 appointments by the governor have to be approved, consented by the Senate. Because not all 990 do, but a lot of them do. And we used to have pages and pages of appointments because we never took them up. Really?
I have a stack worth on my
We
desk.
did. I started doing it about 5 or 6 years ago. Well, when Tim was, anyway, every Friday we would confirm the people that were ready to be confirmed. But there were times when we would have 4 pages of confirmations that hadn't been confirmed yet.
I probably have 60 or 70 on my desk.
right now. Well, but we confirmed everybody before we left.
There are many examples, and we have that built out to start for the registry because it's a second layer for the appointee status if it has to go through this.
Wow.
I know one thing you did ask me for was who I coordinate with for each board. And I actually meant to follow up because I think Andrea has a better list. Who you reached out to have them fill out the reports for boards? Have you?
This comes from Pam.
Oh, okay.
Now, they discussed it in the meeting, which ones they wanted to hear. What was it?
I just know whoever's been reaching out to have the people fill out the forms have been the right people to contact for the most part.
Yeah, so we have right now, it's a good point. We have two areas that we're collecting contact information from, and one is the appointing authorities, learning that pinpoint. And then the secondary is obviously the state boards and commissions themselves for developed parts. So that's a good point on the fact that Andrea, how much counsel we have. We can definitely look through your committee records and know who testified as.
Sonia, have you met Tim?
I have not.
Oh, he's new Ameren.
I guess we haven't. Oh, hi. Nice to meet you. Congratulations on your new role. Yeah, I guess I haven't met everyone. Sorry.
I wasn't sure. I thought, because you were referring to Ameren, and I said, wait a minute, Ameren is just, she's shifting to health and welfare.
I heard that.
Yeah. So
Summer.
just take her place with these committees and with the GovOps kind of portfolio. Okay, any more questions or on the? I'm so glad you like doing this. I said, I'm so glad you like doing this.
I'm glad I like doing. I regret that we didn't have the capacity to start doing that earlier, but I think any opportunity there is to continue working on this or providing information to the General Assembly as the session goes through and looking at, again, it's not for us to make the policy decisions, but be able to point out when there are consistencies or raise those questions that we're receiving as we launch that registry. They can be really resolved through clarity, most likely in legislation more than anything else.
Yeah, and I have no idea who the chair of GovOps will be, but I'm leaving a list of unfinished business.
You don't want to come back and volunteer for the boards and commissions?
No. I'd love to come back and volunteer to be the chair, but it would mean campaigning again and grown-up clothes again. Can't do that. So, no.
And I'm happy to come back at a later date before the commission wraps up its work. I'll definitely be providing information and then, feel free to invite me to come back.
Okay, so the database won't be finished till like the end of October, is that what you're saying?
We're doing the first sample test of appointee information. We're calling that right now to make sure it's up and running.
Okay.
And I don't know really as soon as we are able to launch it. So it's possible we might have a mock-up or have the ability to show you something online that's in a beta form in October or November.
All right, so we have two more meetings, one in October, one in November, so it'd probably be best
October
to.
12th and November 16th.
Yeah, I think if you're able to put me on for the November, then we can, I can always say we don't have, but I'm going to start panicking by November if I don't have a web mock-up, and it won't necessarily have everything that we would hope at this point, but because we do know we're getting likely different platforms, it just seems to be, it'll be exactly what the statute requires. We'll have a lot more information that may not be the web-based information that's directly available to the public.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. Yes, I will plan for that. Thank you all very much.
Thanks.
You have a long day. Probably ready to go home and at least join that it's not raining out today.
Right now, see the sun. Kind of. Yeah, good.
And it's going to be nice and cold.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you.
Tanya.
I'm glad I get to come back and see everyone before
Yep.
session starts. But thank you.
Before we sunset.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true.
There we're sunsetting.
I know, that's why I said before you sunset, it's nice to come back and see the Sunset Advisory Commission.
I don't know why we got to do that, but
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
thanks, Tanya. Okay, do we want to quickly print out copies of the? Oh, hold on. Okay. Got it. I will use for- Here. Okay.
Little sir.
Okay. You know, I was listening to the radio once and they were talking about how yawns are contagious and I started yawning because they were talking about it. Do you think we will need an hour and a half for these 4? Oh, we will have input for the VTA, I know, I'm pretty sure. Okay, yeah, we should probably leave that.
Need a full hour for the per diem, do you think? Because aren't they really only talking about that change in the?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna explain to us what they did and we're gonna make
I
sure
don't
that,
think it'll take an hour.
I doubt if it will either, but, yeah.
Looks good.
Yeah.
Who's testifying? David Englander on the immunization board, which I find so surprising that they have, now that we're in the middle of talking about immunizations, they haven't been active.
So everybody okay with the agenda? Okay.
Great.
So we still need to move on to these other ones.
Yeah, we do.
So I can go back to the Emergency Personnel Survivors Benefit Review Board. And move that we maintain it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The Local Investment Advisory Committee, likewise, I move to maintain it. But we did have questions on that.
We did have questions. I'd prefer deferring that one until our next meeting,
Okay,
until we get our questions answered.
can we somehow get that? I think we're already doing that. The Local Investment Advisory Committee. We're gonna wait till October's meeting to take it on. We're gonna get questions or answers from the, I guess, the treasurer's office, right?
Yes.
Following up on the locations that they're.
So you want that on the next meeting, or you want to do it by?
Well, we need to vote on it, so it has to be the
Yeah.
next meeting, but it'll only take like 2 minutes, once we get the answers.
So
Hopefully, or-
let's try and put them right before noon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Capital Debt Affordability Advisory Committee. I don't think there are any issues here.
No.
I'll move to sustain or to maintain it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. The Private Activity Bond Advisory Committee.
Has been dissolved, it sounded.
Yeah, so we still have to vote, but
Well, it already has been dissolved, but we
It needs to be repealed.
do, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
so I move to repeal it.
Second.
In favor of repeal?
Yeah. Then we had another one that we didn't have a questionnaire on.
Well, the retired employee, no, we
We have a
Financial
questionnaire.
we have a questionnaire on that.
Financial
The
literacy.
Financial Literacy Commission. And do we need to repeal that? Because that hasn't been repealed, right?
That was repealed.
It was repealed, we just don't know. Okay.
So we don't need to repeal it twice.
If you repeal twice, is it like a double negative?
Yeah.
Sorry, Amron.
And then the last.
I told you. I warned you.
The,
People are crazy. Okay.
Recky.
yeah, Recky, I'm trying to, the Retired Employees Committee on Insurance.
I would like to.
Outstanding questions on
Yeah, I
that
would
too?
like to just get answers from VRSEA about why they don't appoint. And there was one other question.
The dental question.
Oh, yeah.
About whether they're actually working with the treasurer's office.
Yeah.
So perhaps, Andrea, we could put that on for next time too.
They probably can go in the same time slot.
Yeah, I would.
I think that was it.
Okay.
And then we just need to add Tanya to our November agenda.
Then my last motion would be to adjourn.
Do we have any discussion on that?
I'd like to stay till 5, just kind of.
I would.
I know.
Were you going to talk about Thanksgiving?
I'm
I thought you were going to talk about Thanksgiving when you came in today.
Well,
I haven't heard a thing about it.
Yeah.
November will be a challenge for me to be for some,
On the 16th?
yes.
Because you're going to be gone already because you have to be setting up tables and chairs.
Trying to.
Yes, yes.
We could always zoom in.
Yeah. That's what I was, if I can do that, I'll happily do that, but
I don't know that you can vote though. I'm unclear. I was surprised to learn how many state employees are still not working in person. But that's another matter.
Oh, no, the world's gone to a hybrid workplace.
Yeah.
Start selling some of those buildings. They're empty.
So
Some of them do that.
have an answer though, whether he can vote or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
The other thing we could do is if he can't be here and he can't vote and we need to vote, we could always make our decisions on everything and schedule
I hate to do that to you.
a meeting right at the beginning. Oh, but the three of us won't be here at at the beginning of the session. I was going to say yeah. We've done that in the GAC.
Yeah,
Can we vote by email?
I don't think so.
have to be in person.
Andrea has a-
Why,
So you're not going to be at the November, right? So we still have no, we don't have a December meeting. November's our last one.
So we move the November date?
Well,
I'm happy to do it to some other time.
But now Rob's going to be there.
There's nothing on here to vote for.
just going down.
You're going to review the draft legislation, committee discussion, and wrap up on other.
Well, we will vote on that.
Oh, you vote on that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So draft legislation.
so I know Rob wants to vote, but the reality is most of these are going to be controversial. So it would be 5-0 as a vote, even if he couldn't, right?
Well, the October one, he can be here and vote.
Right.
It's the November one.
Which is our
And the
last
November one is our last meeting, and we're really,
Over what to do, I guess.
the thing we're voting on November would be the
bill.
bill.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I can zoom in and at least participate in the conversation and, if it comes out, 5-0-1, I mean, it's.
Yeah,
That's what I was thinking.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to have you, if you wanted to vote, I'd want you to vote. But if you couldn't vote, I mean, I don't think most of them are going to be controversial.
Yeah.
It would still be unanimous with one person.
Right. No, I
Yeah.
very much appreciate the opportunity to be able to zoom in and participate, knowing all the while that I probably can't vote, and sorry about that, but.
And the only thing would be on the bill. And you can't introduce the bill this year anyway.
Right, so I don't care.
And I'm assuming we're going to probably see it beforehand and maybe make some edits. And I know I'm late to the party, but will it just be to see it for the first time that day and make changes and stuff that day?
We've usually gotten a draft at some point before that meeting, even if just a few days. Is that
A
possible?
draft request in, you can't, right?
No, Brian can,
Okay, that's,
and
a
he can get a House member to do it.
Well, you guys can still introduce bills.
Oh, yeah, we can, yeah, you can now. Yeah, sure.
You're still in the office.
We can introduce bills until January 4th or whatever day we're kicked out.
Sworn in.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're still elected. You are still elected, sir.
No, I know that. But I didn't know I could sponsor a bill for next biennium.
well, that's the question, I guess.
Well,
The bill comes back to him as a draft,
I've already put in a lot of
around
it.
to approve it.
Maybe that's something that Ledge Council should look, I don't know.
Well, we probably can't.
There would be no one to approve it.
Yeah. I think thinking.
We can get somebody from the House to,
Get Higley.
But it always did originate in the House.
it has always originated in the House.
It
Yeah.
always has originated in the House.
He said Mark Higley would do it.
Okay, so,
Remember, he presented it last year on the.
yeah,
floor.
so we'll get a draft and get Mark to introduce it.
Yeah.
And we should be able to get an answer about the vote. It may be okay. I don't know if the pro tem or the speaker has to okay it, but somebody at one time said that,
My guess it's joint rules. They would have to
okay.
approve it.
It's we're joint committees.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do think it's gonna be predominantly COVID related.
Right, and we're not technically in any emergency anymore, so I don't know whether, I don't know.
Because like, I had a joint legislative management committee, no, House Rules. And my wife had just come down with COVID, so I called, said, hey, can I Zoom in? And because it was COVID related, I talked to the speaker and it would have been okay, but as it turns out, we ended up postponing the meeting anyway because of other
Okay,
things. So at least that was my understanding of, it still had to be somewhat COVID related, but
Well,
a lot more conversation around.
you can vote if you can, and if you can't, you can participate.
So
Okay.
I'll let you know I would have voted if I was here. All
All
right.
right.
Did we vote to adjourn?
we did not yet. There's a motion on the floor.
But still. So, all in favor of adjourning?
All right?
Aye.
No.